being here at the Bartlesville Area History Museum. I'm Kylie Roberson. I'm the director here at the museum, and I'm so honored that we're all here together to gather in memory of Mother Viola Ford Fletcher. This evening is especially meaningful because we're not only remembering an important historical figure, we're recognizing a woman whose courage, resilience, and voice helped ensure that the story of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre would never be forgotten. Mother Fletcher carried that history with dignity and with strength for more than a century. And through her testimony and advocacy, she helped ensure generations would know about the unimaginable tragedy and the enduring perseverance that it took for those survivors. Tonight, we're deeply honored to unveil a commemorative plaque that will become part of our museum's permanent exhibit space, ensuring that her legacy continues to be remembered here in Bartlesville for years to come. And we're especially grateful to have members of Mother Fletcher's family here and her friends with us this evening. So thank you for allowing us this privilege of sharing her life and her memory. We also want to thank all of our community partners and our guests and supporters who made this evening possible. And at this time, it's my great pleasure to introduce Bartlesville Mayor James S. Hurd Jr., who will offer an official welcome on behalf of the city of Bartlesville.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all the work you and the History Museum have done for this plaque. It started out with a proclamation several months ago, and the plaque just evolved from that point on, and looking forward to unveiling it today. So thank you very much, Kylie. Mother Fletcher, as she was affectionately called, was a former Bartlesville resident who at the time of her death was the oldest known survivor of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. She led a remarkable life of resilience, dignity, and unwavering strength. Viola was born May 10, 1914 in Comanche County, Oklahoma, and was only 7 years old in Tulsa when she survived one of the darkest moments in American history. A century later, in 2021, she appeared before Congress to ensure the stories of Tulsa would never be forgotten. In 2023, she released a memoir, Don't Let Them Bury My Story. She was an extraordinary person who cared deeply about remembrance and justice. In her years before moving to Bartlesville, she worked as a welder in a shipyard in California during World War II, and eventually moved to Bartlesville to raise her family. We're proud to have called her our own, and she will always be remembered as a symbol of endurance with an unbreakable spirit. It's a profound honor to recognize her legacy in this plaque in the Bartlesville History Museum this afternoon. It will help ensure that her story and her strength will continue to inspire generations to come. Again, thank you all for coming today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor Hurd. It's now my honor to introduce our guest speaker for this evening, Dr. Raymond Doswell of Greenwood Rising. If you have not visited his museum in Tulsa, it's really a special place, and I can encourage you enough to please go see it. Dr. Doswell has dedicated his work to preserving and sharing the history and legacy of Greenwood. We're grateful to have him with us tonight to share that story with us as we reflect on Mother Fletcher's extraordinary life and enduring impact that all started in the Greenwood district of Tulsa. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Raymond Doswell.
Thank you. Good evening, Bartlesville. My first time here in Bartlesville. Thank you all for coming out. I won't keep you long, and I didn't prepare any formal remarks, but I was asked to speak to the general history of Greenwood and the significance of that history. But thank you all first for hosting this occasion. Thank you to the family for being here. It's an honor to be here to talk about Greenwood history and to try to contextualize it a little bit more. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out for those of you who haven't seen that the museum has borrowed a small exhibit on the history of Greenwood that goes even deeper. They borrowed it from the Museum of Tulsa History, and I'd encourage you all to take a look at that as well. And actually, if you go to the Museum of Tulsa History, or formerly the Tulsa Historical Society, they have a lot of great information there, and especially photographs of Greenwood and its history there. But what is Greenwood and why is it significant? Greenwood is a historic African American community in Tulsa going back to the 1800s, the late 1800s, where African Americans ultimately also settled as the area became more populated from all different cultures and all different folk. But we'd be remiss if we didn't, obviously, and you all know your Oklahoma history. And I'm from Kansas City and St. Louis originally, so I'm still catching up on some Oklahoma history. But the most fascinating part of that history is the great connections, the interesting and great connections to our native cultures here, where in the Tulsa region, as you all would know, that many of the noteworthy native groups that were dispossessed of their land in the American South, the Cherokee, the Creek, the Osage, and others were forcibly moved here during the so-called Trail of Tears period, came to this region that ultimately would become Indian territory, or known as Indian territory, with the Muskogee Creek settling in an area which would become Tulsa. As part of that, it's important to note too that some of those native groups did have African slaves. So there were black people on the Trail of Tears in the 1840s as well. But once emancipation came, those folks were absorbed into those groups as citizens as well. So we commonly call them the freedmen, the Creek freedmen or Cherokee freedmen. And they were able to establish their own communities as well. Many of those communities, along with black migrants who would come in the 1870s, after the Great Migration, after slavery, many African Americans traveling, mostly from the American South, to other places across the country, were ultimately also, many of them, convinced to come to this area. Most, like my family in Arkansas, traveled up to St. Louis. But other families would go to New York City or Chicago or St. Louis or Memphis or even Atlanta and Washington, D.C. and places like that. But there was also a movement to bring people to this area. Why not? Come out here. It's a little bit more space, a little more elbow room, start a farm, you know. Don't go to crowded New York City, go to the south side of Chicago. Come out here and things will be maybe a little bit nicer for you. It depends on your perspective. But many did heed that call, and ultimately a place like, the region of Tulsa began to grow with those migrants as well. To the point that some would argue, well not argue, but there was even an attempt to, with the connections with the native cultures that were already here, establishing what would become Indian territory and a large African American population that was beginning to grow here, forming many of the small communities that would pop up, almost 50 all-black towns in this area, Boley, Oklahoma being among them.
Boley, Drumright,
Muskogee,
Old Muggy.
all these places, some would say that they're trying to create an all-black state in this area. And so they began to flourish as best they could. But as the larger cities began to grow, those smaller towns were losing population, but folks were coming here and being part of it. And then there's the Oklahoma land rush with more migrants coming to the area. And everybody was primarily, not all, but most of them were leaving the American South. Where the land, the natives and black people certainly worked on much more fertile land for agriculture in the South. But of course, this area had something underneath the ground that was a little bit more interesting than even fertile soil. We all know what that is, right? that black gold, that Texas tea, as they said on that oil. And now that, of course, attracted many more migrants to the area. I checked this in the Oklahoma Historical Society said that in the year 1900, the U.S. Census for the region that was Tulsa, the U.S. Census count at that time at 1900 was about just over 5,000–6,000 people. When we get to the count in 1920, it's 75,000. All right. So everyone's coming to take advantage of the oil boom. And there are many enterprising people who take advantage of this growth in population. of note, and I'm sure his picture is on one of these exhibits, is O.W. Gurley, one of the pioneers of Greenwood. Lived in Perry, Oklahoma, had a farm and a grocery store there, bought land near the railroad tracks, the Frisco Line railroad tracks, which are still there. So there's a train that comes by every 20 minutes on those same tracks. Bought land there, started a boarding house for many of the migrants that were there, and bought other properties and built it out that way. And then there's another gentleman named J.B. Stratford, who was also a pioneer, built a hotel in that area, bought other lands and properties, sold it to migrants, sold it to other business people, and many others who developed businesses there. And out of that, we're talking the late 1800s into the early 1900s, that becomes what was known as the Greenwood neighborhood. Primarily the railroad tracks is the southern boundary, Pine Street, what is now Pine Street, the northern boundary, and about 35 to 40 blocks in between becomes the Greenwood neighborhood. And it begins to flourish. 1907, what happens in 1907, Oklahoma history folks?
Become a state.
Statehood, very good. First law in the book, Senate Bill number 1, is a segregation law. Right? So Greenwood, although beginning to flourish, was a box in which black people were stuck because their presence, other than working in the oil fields or maybe as domestics, was not welcome south of the railroad tracks. And that's the harsh reality of it. However, because of segregation, that neighborhood began to prosper because the money that they were bringing from oil and from working south of the tracks and other places began to flow within that neighborhood and stayed within the neighborhood. And that's how the prosperity of that neighborhood began to grow, what one historian describes as the economic detour. All right? And so there was one study that I read that suggested that $1 spent in Greenwood circulated through that community over 30 times before it left the community. Right? And as a result, it wasn't perfect. I mean, sometimes the streets weren't paved as well because the city didn't pay as close attention to it. And there was poverty along the fringes because there were so many people coming at one time. But they had good schools, good churches, and pretty much every facility in terms of what they needed for services and businesses and things like that. To the point that the great educator Booker T. Washington, visiting the region, is credited, and I can't pinpoint exactly when he said it, but he is credited as suggesting that that area of Oklahoma was akin to a Negro Wall Street. Not stocks and bond trading, but just the amount of prosperity that was there. And over time, that morphs into Black Wall Street. And that's why the business section in Greenwood and Archer, the so-called black downtown, if you would, gets the name Black Wall Street. All right? As we move into 1917, or the time of World War I, the country is involved in the war, coming out of the war. African Americans are fighting in the war valiantly. They come back home from Europe. They want, okay, we fought for freedom. We want rights. We want our dignity. But they get pitted against other ethnic groups and racial riots break out everywhere. Houston, Texas, which involved soldiers in 1917. East St. Louis, Illinois, my hometown, 1917. In 1919, the so-called Red Summer. Several race riots break out everywhere, Chicago being one of the larger cities to have an incident. This is one of the worst periods of race relations in world history, if not American history. And what's happening in this region is that there's an interracial labor movement that's getting tamped down with violence. People are growing, the population is growing outside of the railroad tracks in Pine Street, which is making certain people nervous. People are now lusting for this land that's now seems to be semi-well developed next to the railroad tracks. You know, and then it's hard to deny that some outside the community look at this community that is growing, that is somewhat prosperous, that folks are looking good, there's black excellence, there's elegance, and look upon it with jealousy. And these are the tensions of which we sit as we get to 1921. And it's those tensions that ultimately lead to the spark of an incident that involved a young man supposedly attacking a young girl in the elevator, which we were told did not happen. But it caused a panic among certain citizens that they would gather as a mob to go grab him, even though he was arrested in jail. But black citizens band together and said, we're not going to stand for that. And although they tried to protect him in the jail, fighting ensues, and it's lit the spark that gives us the Tulsa Race Massacre.
That's a secondary story, because actually they were in an interracial relationship. Now imagine an interracial relationship in 1921. Talking about forbidden fruit. So when they accosted her, they told her, this came from the niece that came to my house, and we had supper and we talked about the whole ordeal. She was sneaking to their house at night, having supper with an all-black family. When the other bellman recognized that they had some affinity for each other, you know, he said, you know, they were in the elevator jostled, he moved forward, he bumped against her, and this other guy took it to a whole nother level. And they wanted her to prosecute him, and she didn't because she was in love with him. They threatened her with jail time, they did all this stuff, and she said, I'm not gonna say something that didn't happen. But she couldn't say we was in a relationship. So they wanted any reason at all to start this race massacre. They brought him up on charges. They took him, I think, toward Kansas City or somewhere north. And when the judge up there got it, he's like, well, hell, ain't no charges. I can't keep him. So he was released. I think she followed him, you know, that way, and then they kind of go towards Chicago, or, you know, an area where it was more freedom. Chicago, New York. I mean, it kind of lose their trail for a minute. We're still kind of researching. The niece and I are looking into it. I mean, what happened, and you know, whether or not she should write a book about it, or, you know, because people don't know. You know, they think it's something else when it's really a love story. And you know, the guy who supposedly started the race massacre, nothing happened to him. You know, lots of people died. He didn't die. You know what I mean? Go ahead, I'm sorry. Don't get me started, don't get me started. I'm in the know, Don't get me started.
I don't mind a good education.
Yeah.
But at any rate, violence ensues. The entire Greenwood area is damaged or destroyed or looted. We reports say $1.5 million in real estate property damage in 1921 dollars.
Wow.
So estimate that today, that's well over 20 plus $25 million potentially of damage to the area. And the mayor at the time declared it a riot and an uprising. Well, if you got insurance on your property, well, they don't pay out for riots and uprisings. So many were left in the lurch, and hundreds left the city. But many stayed. And it's my understanding that a lot of people stayed because, well, they came to this region to build a better life for themselves, like many other families who wanted to do that. And so they were able to rebuild, not without a lot of problems, but they were able to rebuild and rebuild quickly. And so I'll stop there in that when you come to Greenwood Rising or you see these exhibits that are here, you get to see the rest of the story because the community was able to rebuild and have some more prosperous times in the 40s, but it's still segregated America and it's still segregated Oklahoma that they had to deal with. It's a lesson that we want young people especially to understand and hear, because one of the things when I arrived here in Oklahoma, started working for the History Center, is that so many people, black and white, were saying, look, I went to elementary school here in Oklahoma, I went to university here in Oklahoma, I did not know this story.
That's right. Yeah.
I didn't learn it. I don't remember it in school. I don't remember anybody talking about it. And so and there are many reasons we could speculate on which group or why not this or why not that. But the bottom line is people didn't know the history. They didn't know this part of the history. And yes, it's a difficult part of history to talk about. But when you have resources who are living in plain sight, like Mrs. Fletcher and some of the other folk who were around for years, there are opportunities to learn that history. And fortunately, she was able, through the family as well, to chronicle her story, her aspects of that, and not just what happened in the massacre, but what her life was like afterwards. And those are important lessons to learn. So we want our young people to learn that. We're fortunate at Greenwood Rising that we welcome every 8th grade student from Tulsa Public Schools. We've estimated that that's been about 8,000 students since the museum is open. We've welcomed maybe close to 170,000 visitors to the History Center. Might be interesting to know because during the violence, frankly, the police were involved in ramping up some of the violence that happened. But now, this is something that the Tulsa Police Department makes sure that the communities understand, that their new recruits understand that this is not what we want for our officers. So every police academy recruit, before they join the police force, is required to come through Greenwood Rising. And they do a lot of work also with another organization in our sphere, and that's the Greenwood Cultural Center as well. And the fire department comes. And our friends from Wichita brings their recruits down as well, Wichita, Kansas. So I say that the young people, the school kids, the young police officers who are really just fresh out of college, most of them, these are young people. They're learning this story now. We can't say anymore that we didn't learn the history. And these are hopefully our future leaders. And these future leaders, whether they stay in Tulsa or go someplace else in the world, are now more equipped and more informed by this story. We're fortunate to have stories like Mother Fletcher's. We're fortunate to have these exhibits. And there's an opportunity for everyone to learn. It's not too late to learn this story and be mindful of it and not afraid to share it. We should not be afraid to share it. It's not a pretty story, but there is triumph out of this tragedy. And we want you guys to come and visit us. This is our 5th year at Greenwood Rising, the 5th anniversary of Greenwood Rising. And we're excited that more and more folks in and around the community are interested in learning this history. I thank you for your time. Thank you.
I have been to Greenwood Rising 5 separate times, and I'm always inspired every time that we leave there. It's a beautiful facility. It's wonderfully done, so I cannot echo Dr. Doswell's sentiment enough to please, if you have not seen it, please.
You gotta go 6th time now, because Mother Fletcher will be in there soon. So
See,
you gotta see what they're gonna do.
okay,
for
I
her
will be
display.
back. I will be there. So at this time, I'd like to move to the unveiling of our commemorative plaque honoring Mother Viola Fletcher. I would like to invite Mayor Curd back up for the unveiling, and also Mother Fletcher's grandson to participate as well. Taking pictures over there, and then we'll just on the count of 3, you'll unveil it. So 1, 2, 3. Will be hung in our permanent gallery space just around the corner. At the very end of the gallery there is a tribute to famous Bartians of the years, and we want to make sure that she is adequately honored as a member of that group. So she will have her spot right there permanently in our gallery space.
Okay, Mayor, well, I got you here on the spot. This is a stepping stone to her statue. So we need to so this is a stepping stone to her statue.
The proclamation, the plaque, and the statue.
And then we need the Viola experience. So they can see, they can see where her church stood, because she outlived her church. She outlived 2 of her children, and they can see where she used to have a place to live. And they can see her favorite restaurant. They can come to the museum, because you need to increase the traffic here in Bartlesville. So we need to increase the traffic in Tulsa, but we need some of those dollars to flow down to Bartlesville. So we need more industry here, and if she can be a beacon of hope for people to come down here go to Murphy's like I'm finna do in a few minutes. And that's what we need to do. So people come and we buy gas, go to Quick Trip, get a couple Bama pies, go to Murphy's, come to the museum, and you need that traffic flow.
Be a tourist.
And I think a tourist attraction to see the Viola experience. And the family will help you put that together if you want to do that. So I'm just putting that out there. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. This plaque will now serve as that permanent reminder for us within the museum of Mother Fletcher's courage, her resilience, and lasting impact on our community, on our state, and on our nation, because she is credited with interviews that are now housed in the Library of Congress as well, along with her photos and everything. So her impact is far-reaching. And to close out our program this evening, I'd like to invite Bartlesville City Manager Mike Bailey to come forward for closing remarks.
So I have the honor tonight of just closing out the ceremony. You've heard from some pretty impassioned and amazing people tonight. So before we do close out, I want to just take a moment and first off thank everyone for attending. Your attendance at this event makes it clear that her impact extends beyond her family and her friends. And although you all are here as well, it extends into our community, into our state, and into our country. So we're pleased to be able to add this to our history museum and to make it part of our community forever. But a few special things. First off, to the friends and family. I know you all came a long way, and it means a lot for us that you chose to share your time with us here tonight. So thank you. And Dr. Doswell, thank you, sir. It was incredible. So we appreciate you coming down. You didn't come quite as far as they did. But you came down, and it's a Monday night, and I know what that drive is like on a Monday night. So thank you very much. So
I want what you drinking last night, because it's Tuesday night.
It was Memorial Day.
You get past it was.
It's gonna be Monday. It's gonna be on Monday all week. So, but even though we're closing out the ceremony, what we want to do is to invite everybody to hang out for a little bit. Please come and take a look at the plaque. This again is part of our permanent collection, and then take your time and exhibit and look at the Spirit of Greenwood exhibit. So. We thank you all for joining us. Oh, and by the way, there's refreshments. They're amazing. Kylie did a great job. Thank you to Kylie.
The team here at Vision.
Yep. Thank you for Kylie and for her team for putting this together. Thank you, Mayor, for making this happen. And thank you all for joining us tonight. So, you all have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.